In Ezekiel 22, God rebukes the corrupt, sinful city of Jerusalem and her leaders, saying, "Her priests have violated my law and profaned my holy things. They have not distinguished between the holy and unholy, nor have they made known the difference between the unclean and the clean. And they have hidden their eyes from my Sabbaths, so that I am profaned among them." And this is precisely the point, that we are called to distinguish between what is holy and unholy, what is unclean from what is clean, and act out accordingly. The profane man makes no such distinction, and in its worst expression manifests a complete inversion of holy and unholy. So before we get into the many examples of desecration throughout the SnyderVerse, I want to talk about one good biblical example involving Moses and the golden calf that highlights the duality of desecration. From Exodus 32, verse 19, it says, "And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot. And he cast the tables out of his hands and brake them beneath the mount." So here Moses is angry that the Israelites broke their covenant with God, treated it like trash, and he therefore breaks the tablets to symbolize their idolatry, which is the desecration of the Holy Covenant. In verse 20 it says, "And he took the calf which they had made, and burnt it in the fire, and ground it to powder, and strawed it upon the water, and made the children of Israel drink of it." So here he destroys the image of idolatry, and therefore desecrates the desecration. These two destructions mirror each other in that one represents the negative breaking of the covenant with God, desecrating something truly holy, and the other represents the purifying destruction of idolatry of the golden calf, desecrating the idolatrous false holy, false idol, false god. The melting down, pulverizing mixture with water and having them drink of it is like a desecration of the desecration, a defiling of the defiling, sacrilege of the sacrilegious back into the alchemical prima materia, the chaotic waters, whereby subsequent renewal occurs. In other words, if someone holds a false image as holy, ultimately leaving one idle in the divine work of God's will, or the good, it then becomes good, it becomes God's will to divest it of its sacred character, or desecrate it. On the other hand, if someone breaks the covenant with God, they have desecrated, disrespected, divested of its sacred character, something that is truly good or truly holy, thus the negative image of desecration. It's good to keep this in mind as we now examine the multitudinous instances of desecration, because there are a lot of things that can be desecrated and a lot of ways to desecrate those things. And there's good and bad that we'll see in each particular example, but I'll leave it to the viewer, and I think it is left to the audience to decide overall which case is good, which case is bad. Are we desecrating something idolatrous, or are we desecrating something that is truly holy? The holy thing in the holy space on the left side, and the profane thing in the profane space, that is a good thing. That is a proper thing. That is in accordance with God's will. That is in accordance with the good. And if there is a profane person or a villain of some type, to then take the holy thing and treat it like garbage, or take the profane thing and treat it like it's holy, then you have desecrated something that's truly holy. So this would be like, these red lines would be breaking the covenant with God, or the good. And the hero, if they come along and reverse that and put the holy back in its proper place and put the profane thing back in its profane space, its proper place, then we have again a proper hierarchy. We have again the good. And so that would be represented as Moses pulverizing the golden calf. So that is a desecration of the idolatrous image. And if you have stake in the idolatrous image on the right, then that desecration, that good desecration, will be traumatic for you. That might be a very hard thing to swallow, a very hard pill to swallow, if suddenly someone comes along and destroys your golden calf, right? And so you might even see that hero as a villain if you have stake in the idolatrous image, okay? All right, so I've tried to categorize the various examples in useful ways, but truthfully, that's going to be somewhat arbitrary because the examples are so multifaceted, so many different aspects to them, that what I put in one category could very well be put in another. And so treat the categories as just something I'm choosing to focus on at any given moment in time, a particular aspect of desecration. So the particular aspect here is desecration as a show of simple disrespect, right? So that's one of the definitions, is showing disrespect towards something that should be regarded as sacred. And so for our first example, we have Clark, who sits alone, right, on a school bus, and he's sort of in this mood of quiet contemplation. We know Clark is sacred because the story is about him. He's got special powers. He's an alien. He's on a holy journey, right? He's on a hero's journey. And Pete Ross is not privy to any of this. He doesn't know anything about Clark's special abilities, and so he plays the role of the profane man. So, when he tries to communicate with Clark, he doesn't show respect or acknowledge the sacred character of Clark, right, as he enters his personal space. He's careless and brings up sort of this barrage of disrespect and profanity.
Hey, asswipe. What do you think? You see the game?
Not just towards Clark, but also towards Lana.
Leave him alone, Pete.
Oh, what, he was girlfriend? I want to hear what he has to say. Come on, dick splash.
Next, we have an older Clark, right? So in this case, Clark is in the role of the profane man who denigrates his earthly father, right? And as not his true father, as just some guy who found him in a field. So he's not treating his father as something sacred, and his relationship with his father as something sacred. He's treating it as trash. He's treating it as meaningless and pointless and nothing worthy of respect.
Farming, feeding people, that's not useful.
I didn't say that.
Our family's been farming for 5 generations, Clark.
Your family, not mine. I don't even know why I'm listening to you. You're not my dad. You're just some guy who found me in a field.
Clark!
So in this sense, he desecrates his father by treating him and his role as trivial, right? Undeserving of respect, not sacred, not holy. It's very dismissive overall of Clark for him to kind of disrespect the sacred relationship with his father in this way. And so he plays the role of the profane man. So it doesn't, right? So these moods and aspects don't have to, they're not fixed, they're not rigid, they're not absolute in one, being. It's like, we can all sort of express moments of profanity, right? We can all sort of embody that from time to time, and then we can come back to the sacred and the holy.
Look, Dad, hold on.
And so for our next example, we have Bruce and Clark talking at Lex's place, and their back and forth culminates in Bruce's bold contempt for the holy figure or image of Superman and his outfit, right? His outfit is a sacred thing. It's got all this special Kryptonian language. It's otherworldly. And so consider also Clark's innocent joy when he put on the suit that reconnects him with his people. The entire beginning sequence of Man of Steel is about finding where he comes from, and you can tell when he puts on the suit, he's very proud of that suit, right? He even gleefully says, "On my world it means hope," with this smile on his face. So he's very proud of this suit, and here Bruce is shooting all of that down with his words, right?
Most of the world doesn't share your opinion, Mr. Wayne.
Maybe it's the Gotham City in me. We just have a bad history with freaks dressed like clowns.
And so you can see Clark's pain. He feels it's this internalized pain upon desecration of his sacred suit. Something as simple as a handshake, which is effectively a ritualistic greeting whereby one communicates respect upon meeting them. So its rejection is a desecration. It's a show of disrespect, a strong show of disrespect, because it's so ingrained in our society to do that, right? So it's a strong show of disrespect towards something that society might otherwise compel one to show respect towards. So it's, right, we're supposed to treat the other person as holy, and we're supposed to show respect for that person when we meet someone new. Here, Colonel Hardy rejects the ritual handshake, disrespecting Lois Lane, and Lois Lane returns with a show of profanity.
The only reason I'm here is because we're on Canadian soil and an appellate court overruled your injunction to keep me away. So if we're done measuring dicks, can you have your people show me what you found?
In BVS, she mirrors this show of desecrating disrespect toward Jimmy Olsen, who offers the ritual handshake, which she in turn rejects. Right? Moments later, she continues down this line of desecration by rejecting his offer of conversation.
This is like pioneer stuff. Mama Jog's never given an interview.
You know what Heron always says when we're on assignment together? Not a goddamn thing. I like Heron.
Which we, the audience, later understand to be a dishonest effort to probe intel for the CIA. The group of men on horseback, led by Python during the Nairobi sequence, profane the CIA's use of drones, right? With profane words.
Negative. RPA to engage. Stand down and get black.
Well, there'll be friendlies in the blast zone, so call off the goddamn drone.
Stand down is an order.
And profane gestures, and therefore desecrates the holy image of the drone, which we will discuss again toward the end of the section. We note the traumatic internalized pain or aftershock felt upon desecration, right? And a lot of these, there's this like shock associated with something being desecrated, which is natural, right? So something that's desecrated is often desecrated for a reason, to communicate something, to say that this thing needs to be taken down from its position of height, right? So Jimmy Olsen just briefly looks at his hand as if it's been cut in some way, or if it's been shot, right? As if it's been damaged in some manner. Clark, right, is very much in pain at the desecration of his suit. Martha is very much in shock at Clark's profane attitudes towards his earthly father. And so to desecrate is to act out in such a way as to tear someone down from their literal, perceived, or metaphorical height, tearing someone down from their high horse, you might say. So you can also have desecration of objects. So objects can be treated as holy or sacred. And so if you destroy those things, then that is like desecration, and it might hurt when those objects are destroyed, right? We, as fans of the SnyderVerse, know people watching Man of Steel and all that destruction of buildings, people held those buildings as sacred. And I guess, right, from my point of view, they're just buildings. But from their point of view, it's like, these are sacred things. That's like a lot of money. That's a lot of damage.
Are you effing stupid?
It's one of your surveillance drones.
That's a $12 million piece of hardware.
It was.
It's only stuff, Clark. It can always be replaced.
But you can't be.
So that hurt them when they saw it. It didn't hurt me none. But it hurt them because they perceived those buildings as sacred. So even physical objects can be treated as sacred. There's a lot of examples throughout the SnyderVerse of that, right? So in the Nairobi sequence, we see Anatoly desecrate Jimmy Olsen's camera. He takes it from his hands, takes it apart, rips up the film, steps on it, right? All of these things convey a clear disrespect toward Jimmy and his camera, basically saying, you are nothing, your camera is nothing, I can do what I want to it, and I will do what I want to it right in front of your face, right? So he does all of this without hesitation right in front of his face. This is just a very blatant show of disrespect. This is a good spot to also emphasize the fact that when you desecrate a physical object, you can also think of that as like dismantling or a removing of the surrounding layers, sort of removing the veil of the surrounding layers, because when they do that here, you get to some truth, right? There's like a little seed of truth once you remove those surrounding layers. So removing that allows one to see something that's true, something that's hidden. Yeah, so the CIA infiltration in this case was a hidden component in all this, and then Anatoly desecrated the object to then reveal that truth. In our next example, we have Lois Lane's journal. Naturally, a journalist would consider their journal a sacred object, right? That's where all their thoughts, all their notes, etc. get written down. And we see here it gets desecrated in the crossfire. So her journalistic efforts for profane reasons, for greed and perhaps self-aggrandizement, are here violently juxtaposed to the traumatic reality on the ground. We might say there is a domino effect connecting those profane efforts with the subsequent violence that ensues. So we see visually that like the bullets sort of trail, connect to her journal. And so maybe that's like a domino effect showing this sort of causality, this link between like her efforts as a journalist and the reality of desecration of bodies and lives, etc. on the ground that we'll talk about as well.
Take up your mother's trident.
You can't turn your
back on the world forever, Arthur.
In Zack Snyder's Justice League, we have the sacred object of the trident, right? So the trident is this sacred thing that Arthur is being pleaded with to take up the mantle, right? Take up the mother's trident and take up that mantle of answering the call of conscience. Really, that's really what it is the call to action, the call to the hero's journey, right? And he's choosing instead idleness, and so it gets tossed in the same manner that Moses broke the tablets, right? Throwing it down is symbolic of the fact that Arthur, Aquaman here, is choosing idleness, i.e. not answering the call of conscience, not answering the hero's call, and instead choosing to just kind of do his own thing and say, oh, that's meaningless, that's not important. So he's treating something sacred with disrespect, and we see here the visual parallel with throwing it, being tossed on the ground as if it's garbage, right? As if it's nothing, right? So that's a major theme here, is the profane man treats something holy like garbage, right? It's like one of the worst things you can imagine, is something that is truly sacred. Treating it as trash is almost like the root cause of all of our existential angst, because we're not adhering to proper attitudes. So this is like Arthur desecrating that, and therefore engaging in an idolatry of idleness with respect to the divine work, the holy work that he's supposed to be answering, right?
Let me speak to you from my heart, not as a scientist, as a father.
Another example is we have a scene where Cyborg listens to the tape made by his father, sharing something more personal about the relationship. So that personal thing the father is sharing is therefore sacred. It's an honest, sincere reaching out to Cyborg. And instead, Cyborg, right, breaks that in his hand because he holds contempt for his father, because he kind of blames the accident he had with his mother on him for not being there, etc. Like, if you were there, then, this wouldn't have happened, right? Some sort of rationale like that. And so he blames it on him. And so something sincere in this tape recording, which again is sharing, the father's feelings and sincere kind of reaching out to reconnect with his son, is just being like, Cyborg is like, this is nothing. I'm going to treat it like trash, right? So you can see all of these images here. It's like, when you have something sacred, you treat it like garbage. That's desecration, right? That's one way to kind of show desecration. And so there are other ways to treat things as garbage, to treat it as nothing, but kind of tossing it to the ground, breaking it, and letting it fall apart. All of that is really harboring the same attitude of desecration.
This bat vigilante has been consistently targeting the port and the adjacent projects and tenements, and as far as I can tell, the cops are actually helping him.
Crime wave in Gotham. Other breaking news. Water. Wet. Did you file the football yet?
Why aren't we covering this? Poor people don't buy papers?
People don't buy papers, period, Kent.
Perry, when you assign a story, you're making a choice about who matters and who's worth it.
Good morning, Smallville.
The American conscience died with Robert, Martin, and John.
So you can also have desecration of journalistic ideals or journalistic integrity, right? So journalists are supposed to work honestly to inform the public in useful ways. Often, though, what is considered journalism these days looks more akin to self-righteous gossip puff pieces, thus desecrating on its expected function or true purpose, right? So for our first example here, we have Clark, who wants to focus on a story that he feels in his heart of hearts is the right thing, that is good, with true and pure intent. Like, there's this Batman doing stuff in Gotham, and there's poor people having to deal with him. We should be talking about that, right? Perry proceeds to humiliate and belittle Clark and his efforts, so desecrating on something that should be meaningful, right?
I logged into your Dropbox to find copy. There's copy, all right. But nothing about football. Nothing about friends of the Metropolis Library. Just the goddamn Gotham Bat thing I told you not to pursue.
He even prints out this piece that Clark did to tear it up apart in front of his face, requiring him instead to write about football and friends of the Metropolis Library, right? So thereby desecrating, disrespecting, destroying something Clark holds as important, meaningful, holy, sacred. It is clearly a desecration of the ideals of journalistic integrity, where something like football and wealthy friends of the Metropolis Library eating their hero cake is prioritized over poor people in Gotham, dealing with a rich vigilante, instilling fear in the innocent and guilty alike, as well as an idle police force, also prioritizing football over their sacred duty, their sacred oath, right, to protect and serve, right? So they've put something above what is holy. So the police do that, the news does that, right? So it's again, there's desecration, there's idolatry everywhere. This is an example of idolatry where we're focusing on football or friends of the Metropolis Library, right? So the wealthy elite, you're sort of worshiping them by placing them as above something else that should be important, which Clark is actually trying to bring to light.
Come on, it's me we're talking about. I'm a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter.
Then act like it.
Print it or I walk.
You can't. You're under contract.
I'm sending you the original article. My editor won't print it, but if it happened to leak online.
But didn't you once describe my site as a creeping cancer of falsehoods?
I stand by my words, Woodburn. But I want this story out there.
Why?
Because I want my mystery man to know I know the truth.
And so we also have Lois releasing information about Clark on the internet, right? So this is in Man of Steel. Her act alone is a desecration of notions of proper, slower, careful course of journalism. So we know, especially in our in the real world, what's one of the main problems with journalism and news is people trying to get to the story quick and trying to just put something out there without actually verifying anything. They just think, just throw a bunch of trash to the screen, just throw a bunch of trash and garbage out for people to kind of eat up. And that is a desecration. That's treating something that should be sacred, news, informing the public, as if it's garbage, right? As if it doesn't matter, just for the holy dollar, right? So that's idolatrous. The holy dollar is idolatrous. And so in so doing, she treats Clark's story, his sacred origin here, right? That's the story she's trying to come out on, is Clark and who he is. And there's like, oh, wow, there's this alien. So she's treating his sacred origin, again, this is a holy journey, this is a hero's journey, for profane purposes, right? She wants to be the first to release and reveal this. And so this is emphasized by the fact that she reveals it through Woodburn's website, which she herself described as a creeping cancer of falsehoods. So note how she, loosely speaking, shotguns the drink, right? And it kind of shocks, right? There goes that shock again. Kind of shocks, right? Woodburn, as he watches her do this, right?
You let Woodburn just shotgun it all over the internet. Now, the publishers want me to sue you.
And Perry White describes what she did as letting Woodburn shotgun it all over the internet, right? So a shotgun is like a very messy, imprecise thing, right? So all this language brings up notions of this sense of carelessness, right? So she's taken the holiness of Clark's journey and is treating it as if it's profane, just like, just toss it out there. Doesn't matter if it's in, a website that she considers a creeping cancer of falsehoods. Just put it out there. Nothing sacred. Just nothing matters, right? So all of this is a very nihilistic kind of attitude. The profane man is ultimately nihilistic because it's like nothing really matters. And we'll talk about more of that in the next section. So what she did is a profanation or desecration of something sacred, therefore requiring penance.
2 weeks leave, no pay, that's your penance.
One of my favorite moments of desecration, oh, this is a beautiful one, is in BVS. We have the news station elevated above Martha on the wall, right? So it's elevated even. It's on the wall. It's above, right? So it has like this, it's in this position of, of priority by being above on the wall.
The question still remains, where is he? If Superman was not involved, If he's got nothing to hide, then why hasn't he been seen since the day of this tragedy?
You can't point a finger.
I'm not pointing anything, Warren. Look, 10 fingers, see?
If there is going to be a criminal.
We have Nancy Grace, right, engaging in what can only be described as idle banter, when they're supposed to be talking about something that is actually important. So people actually died on Capitol Hill, and she's treating it as if it's nothing. She's trying to pretend, and she has this like feigning attitude, like, let's get to the truth and all that. But really it's about the show. It's about this kind of false show. And so this is idolatrous because, first of all, it's idle banter. Second of all, it's elevated as more important than doing what is right, doing the holy work, right? So what she's doing isn't really going to get anywhere. It's just for clicks. It's just for attention. It's just for views, right? It's just for ratings, just for money. It's just for profane reasons. And so this idle banter is elevated. This profane discourse is prioritized in the news cycle, and Martha rightfully shuts it off in desecration of its idolatry. So Martha is seeing something like a golden calf, shutting it off like Moses, right? Saying, cut, stop this. This is stupid. You can see she's pretty annoyed at what's being shown with her facial expression. But what I like most is that the next scene, the next scene proceeds to show Martha taking out the trash. Why would she be taking out the trash, right? So you could say, oh, well, she's working there. She's taking out the trash. Why is the story showing her take out the trash, right? This isn't a real thing. So if they're showing her take out the trash, then that is on purpose. Everything is on purpose. So this is an intentional transition connecting the news, initially being placed in a position of priority high on the wall, to Martha effectively shutting it off and placing the profane, the garbage, where it belongs, right? So she's by shutting off the nonsense on TV, she takes that and she's putting it in the garbage where it belongs, right? It's idolatrous, it's trash. So like Moses, you pulverize the idolatrous thing, you destroy it and toss it where it belongs, outside of profanum, the temple, right? So outside of the temple, okay? So profane, you take the profane thing, profanum, outside the temple. So Martha is symbolically doing the holy work of taking out that trash, okay? So it's a really cool instance of desecration of some idolatrous or idol activity that's being elevated falsely above what is true. And so it's taken outside of the holy temple.